The inkwell shattered against the wall 3 inches from Miriam Thorne's left ear, and Lady Ashworth's voice followed it like a second projectile. "You clumsy, worthless creature! You have ruined everything." Miriam stood perfectly still in the morning room, black ink dripping down the cream silk wallpaper behind her. The 2 Ashworth daughters sat frozen at the writing desk. 3 visiting ladies from the Countess of Whitmore's circle observed from the settee, teacups suspended halfway to their lips. "I tripped on the carpet edge, my lady," Miriam said. She kept her voice even. "The same carpet edge that caught Miss Catherine's heel last Tuesday." "You dare!" Lady Ashworth's face purpled. "You dare speak my daughter's name with your common tongue. I hired you because the agency assured me you could manage a schoolroom. Instead, you spill ink on my imported wallpaper, teach my daughters your provincial accent, and now you presume to excuse yourself by invoking Catherine." The visiting ladies exchanged glances. This was better entertainment than the promised musical recital. "I apologize for the wallpaper," Miriam said. "I do not apologize for speaking the truth. The carpet is a hazard. I have mentioned it 4 times in writing." Lady Ashworth's hand connected with Miriam's cheek. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. "Dismissed," Lady Ashworth hissed. "You will pack your things and leave within the hour, without references, without the wages owed you for this month. My solicitor will ensure no respectable house in London will consider you." Miriam touched her burning cheek. 26 years old, £4 in savings, and no family left to turn to. Her father's scandal had destroyed everything 2 years ago. Forging documents for a banking consortium, they said. Dead in prison before trial. Her mother had followed within 6 months, from shame as much as illness. The governess position had been her last respectable option. Now even that was gone. "I will collect my things," Miriam said. She turned toward the door. "Wait." One of the visiting ladies rose from the settee. Her voice carried an authority that stopped every person in the room. "I should like to hear more about these hazardous carpets. Lady Ashworth, you mentioned your solicitor. That would be Mr. Pemberton of Gray's Inn, yes? My husband's firm examined his work last quarter. Such interesting documentation practices." Lady Ashworth went very white. The visiting lady was perhaps 60, with iron-gray hair and the kind of pearls that whispered old money. She crossed to Miriam and examined her cheek with clinical detachment. "This will bruise visibly by evening," she observed. "How unfortunate! I am hosting a dinner tonight for 40 guests. Several of them sit on charitable boards that fund your husband's political ambitions, Lady Ashworth." She paused. "Of course, I could always mention that I witnessed a domestic disturbance here this morning, or I could simply invite Miss Thorne to dine with me and say nothing at all." Lady Ashworth's mouth opened and closed twice. "Pack your trunk, dear," the lady said to Miriam. "You're coming with me. My nephew needs a governess for his ward, and I believe you'll do admirably." Miriam followed her from the room without looking back. The carriage was black lacquer with no crest on the door. The interior smelled of leather and something else, something green and alive, like crushed herbs. The lady introduced herself as Mrs. Adelaide Cross, while the carriage rattled through Mayfair. "My nephew is Lord Blackwood," she said. "You will not have heard of him. He prefers it that way." "Lord Blackwood of the banking family?" Miriam asked. "The one that disappeared from society 15 years ago?" Mrs. Cross smiled. "You know your history. His parents died in a fire. He withdrew from public life. Recently he acquired a ward, a boy of 7 whose parents were killed in a carriage accident on the continent. The boy needs education. My nephew needs someone capable of managing a household that operates by unconventional hours." "Unconventional how?" "Lord Blackwood suffers from a condition that makes daylight painful. He conducts all his affairs after dark. His household follows his schedule. Lessons would be in the evening, from 8 until midnight. The boy sleeps until noon." Miriam counted the gas lamps passing outside the window. 7, 8, 9. "The salary?" "Triple what Lady Ashworth paid you, room and board included, 1 half-day free each week. 12 lamps. 13. "Why me? You knew nothing about me until 10 minutes ago. Mrs. Cross folded her hands in her lap. I knew your father. Marcus Thorne was no forger. He discovered evidence of forgery within the consortium and threatened to expose it. They destroyed him first. I could not save him then. I can offer you this now. The carriage turned down a street Miriam did not recognize. The houses here stood back from the road, hidden behind high walls and old trees. I'll take the position, Miriam said. Blackwood House rose from the darkness like something that had grown there rather than been built. 3 stories of dark stone, with windows that gleamed faintly gold in the October evening. The front garden held roses that should have died weeks ago but bloomed thick and red in the gaslight. A butler named Carstairs met them at the door. He had the look of a man who had seen everything and chosen to forget most of it. Lord Blackwood is in the library, he said. He asked to meet Miss Thorne immediately. The library occupied the entire rear wing of the ground floor. Books climbed every wall from floor to ceiling. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across Persian carpets worn soft by centuries of footsteps. Lord Blackwood stood at the window with his back to the door. He turned when Mrs. Cross spoke his name, and Miriam understood immediately why he avoided daylight. He was beautiful in a way that made the eye uneasy. Dark hair swept back from a face carved in planes of shadow and light. His eyes were the gray of winter dawn, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Miss Thorne. His voice was low and precise. My aunt tells me you were dismissed for speaking the truth to a woman who preferred lies. I was dismissed for knocking over an inkwell, my lord. The truth was incidental. A muscle shifted in his expression. It might have been amusement. Tell me about your qualifications. I was educated at Miss Pemberton's Academy in Bath. I speak French, German, and passable Italian. I can teach mathematics through basic calculus, history through the present reign, and literature including the works Lady Ashworth specifically forbade her daughters to read. Which works were those? Anything by a woman. Anything political. Anything that might encourage independent thought. Miriam paused. I disagreed with the restriction. Yet you enforced it. I enforced it openly. I left copies of Mary Wollstonecraft in their music folios where their mother never looked. Now he definitely smiled. It transformed his face from coldly perfect to something warmer, more dangerous. My ward is called Thomas. He is 7 years old, traumatized by his parents' deaths, and convinced that monsters hide in every shadow. I need someone who can teach him without frightening him further. I don't frighten children, my lord. No. He studied her face, her bruised cheek. I imagine you do not. A small sound came from the doorway. A boy stood there in a nightshirt, clutching a stuffed rabbit whose ears had been loved to tatters. His hair was the color of wheat, and his eyes were enormous with sleeplessness. Uncle Julian? His voice trembled. I heard voices. Lord Blackwood crossed to the boy in 3 strides and knelt before him. The movement was fluid, almost too fast. Miriam filed that detail away. Thomas, this is Miss Thorne. She is going to be your governess. The boy looked at Miriam with grave assessment. Do you know about monsters? Miriam crouched to his level. I know about several kinds. Some are in storybooks, some are in history, and some are people who choose to be cruel because they think no one will stop them. What about the other kind, the ones that come out at night? I have not met those yet, but if I do, I will study them very carefully and report back. Thomas considered this. Then he held out his rabbit. This is Captain Buttons. He watches for monsters when I sleep. A fine soldier, Miriam said solemnly. I am honored to meet him. She shook the rabbit's paw. Thomas almost smiled. Behind her, she felt Lord Blackwood's gaze on her back, and the fine hairs on her neck rose as if touched by static from a coming storm. The first week established a strange rhythm. Miriam slept until 10, breakfasted alone, and spent the afternoon preparing lessons in the schoolroom. Thomas appeared at 7 each evening, bright-eyed and curious after his inverted sleep schedule. They studied geography by tracing rivers on a globe that spun in the gaslight. Lord Blackwood observed from the doorway sometimes. He never spoke during lessons, but she felt his attention like a physical pressure. He moved too quietly. He never seemed to eat. When she mentioned this to Mrs. Cross, the older woman only smiled and changed the subject. On the 9th night, everything shifted. Thomas was practicing his penmanship when Carstairs appeared with a calling card on a silver tray. His face had gone the color of old paper. "The Countess of Whitmore is in the drawing-room, my lord. She insists on seeing you." Lord Blackwood had been reading by the fire, a book of Flemish poetry that Miriam recognized from her father's collection. He closed it with careful deliberation. "Did she come alone?" "With her solicitor, and Lady Ashworth." Miriam's pen slipped. Black ink bloomed across her lesson plan. "Stay here," Lord Blackwood said, and it took her a moment to realize he was speaking to her. "Keep Thomas occupied. Do not come downstairs." He left without waiting for acknowledgement. Thomas looked up from his copybook. "Who is the Countess of Whitmore?" "A lady of consequence." Miriam kept her voice steady. "Shall we continue with your letters?" But Thomas was watching the door with that particular stillness that children develop when they sense adult tension. "Uncle Julian is worried. I can tell. His hands went cold when he touched my shoulder yesterday." Perhaps he had been outside. It wasn't that kind of cold. Thomas gripped Captain Buttons tighter. It was the cold that means something bad is coming. From below, Miriam heard voices rising. One of them was Lady Ashworth's, shrill with triumph. She caught fragments: ward, unsuitable, investigation, blood relation. "Miss Thorne?" Thomas's voice went very small. "Are they here to take me away?" Miriam set down her pen. "Come with me." She led him to the schoolroom window, which overlooked the back garden. The October roses blazed impossibly red against the stone walls. "Do you see those roses?" she said. "Count them." "Why?" "Because counting gives your mind something to do while your heart decides whether to be frightened." Thomas pressed his nose to the glass. 1, 2, 3, 4. Miriam listened to the argument below. The walls in this old house were thick, but raised voices carried through the bones of the structure. She heard the word heir. She heard the word Ashworth. Her blood went cold. She opened the schoolroom door and slipped into the hallway. The main staircase curved down to the entrance hall, and from the landing she could see into the drawing-room through the half-open door. Lady Ashworth stood with her back to the fire, flanked by an elderly woman dripping with diamonds and a thin man in solicitor's black. Lord Blackwood faced them, absolutely still. "The documentation is quite clear," the solicitor was saying. "Thomas Ashworth is the sole surviving heir of Edmund Ashworth, Baron Hartwell. Lady Ashworth is the boy's grandmother. She has prior claim." "Lord Blackwood was appointed guardian by the boy's parents," Lord Blackwood said. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Their wishes were explicit. Thomas was not to be placed with the Ashworth family." "Their wishes were influenced by baseless suspicion," Lady Ashworth snapped. "My son made errors in judgment, but he was not the villain Harriet painted him. Now both he and his wife are dead, and my grandson is being raised in a household of shadows by a man who never sees daylight." The Countess of Whitmore spoke for the first time. "There have been complaints from the servants, Lord Blackwood. Strange hours, strange visitors. The governess you hired so hastily is the daughter of a convicted forger." Miriam gripped the banister hard. "Miss Thorne's father was falsely accused," Lord Blackwood said. "As you know perfectly well, Countess, your late husband sat on the board of the consortium that destroyed him." A long silence. "We will pursue this through the courts," the Countess said finally. "You are an unmarried man with no familial connection to the child. Your household operates in a manner that can only be described as irregular. Your nocturnal habits suggest an illness or vice that renders you unfit for guardianship." "And Miss Thorne will be called to testify," Lady Ashworth added. and her voice held vindictive pleasure. About everything she has observed in this house, every peculiarity, every abnormality. My solicitor has already made contact with Judge Wentworth, who owes my husband several favors. Lord Blackwood said nothing. Miriam descended 3 more steps. The ancient wood creaked under her foot. Every head in the drawing room turned toward her. Thomas has been counting roses, she said. He is currently at 74. When he finishes, he will want to know why people are shouting about him as if he were property to be divided. Lady Ashworth's face twisted. You, the clumsy governess! How dare you? I dare because someone must. Miriam came down the rest of the stairs. You speak of Thomas as an heir, a commodity, a position to be claimed. In the 9 days I have known him, I have watched him learn to sleep without nightmares. I have watched him begin to trust that the adults around him will not disappear. I have watched him stop expecting to be struck when he makes mistakes. What precisely are you implying? Lady Ashworth's voice could have cut glass. I am not implying anything. I am observing. Thomas is terrified of his grandmother. He told me so on the 3rd night, when he woke screaming from a dream about a woman who called him worthless and clumsy. The Countess looked at Lady Ashworth with new calculation. The child has a nervous disposition, Lady Ashworth said quickly. His mother coddled him. His mother protected him. Miriam stood in the drawing-room doorway now. From you. That is why your son was disinherited. That is why Thomas was placed with Lord Blackwood. Not because of irregular hours or nocturnal habits, but because Harriet Ashworth feared what would happen to her son if you ever had control of him. Lord Blackwood moved. It was barely a shift in position, but suddenly he stood between Miriam and the others, a wall of contained fury. Miss Thorne speaks from observation, he said. I have documentation from Thomas's parents detailing their concerns about his safety in Lady Ashworth's care. Should this matter proceed to court, the documentation will be entered into evidence, along with testimony from the household staff of Hartwell Manor regarding certain incidents during Thomas's infancy. Lady Ashworth went the color of curdled cream. You're bluffing, the Countess said, but her certainty had cracked. I never bluff. Lord Blackwood's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. I simply wait until my opponents expose themselves. You came here tonight believing I would capitulate to avoid scrutiny. You miscalculated. The solicitor shuffled his papers. Perhaps we should revisit the timeline for legal proceedings. Get out of my house. The words settled between them like frost. They left. Miriam watched from the window as their carriage rattled away into the darkness, and only when the sound faded completely did she let herself breathe. That was remarkably foolish, Lord Blackwood said behind her. And remarkably brave. I am uncertain which adjective should take precedence. Miriam turned. He stood closer than she had realized, close enough that she could see the unusual clarity of his eyes, the way they seemed to catch the candlelight and hold it. I counted to 12 before I spoke, she said. My father used to say that 12 was enough time to choose words without letting silence become surrender. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. Her throat tightened. He was also innocent of every charge against him. But you knew that already. Yes. Mrs. Cross said you could not save him. What did she mean? Lord Blackwood walked to the window and stood beside her, looking out at the impossible roses. I learned of his situation too late. By the time my resources could be mobilized, he was already dead. I have spent 2 years gathering evidence to exonerate him posthumously. Why? Because justice matters. Because lies should not stand unchallenged. He paused. Because your father once showed kindness to someone I loved, many years ago, and I do not forget such debts. Miriam watched his profile in the window glass. His reflection was strange, faint, as if he stood further away than he actually did. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow will be difficult, They will return with new weapons. What weapons? I do not know yet, but they will not surrender Thomas easily. There is money attached to his inheritance, and Lady Ashworth is drowning in debt. Miriam nodded. She should go. She should return to the schoolroom, to the sleeping boy, to the ordinary duties of a governess. Instead, she said, "The roses should be dead by now. It's October." Lord Blackwood's mouth curved. "They are a particular variety, bred to bloom in darkness. I have always preferred things that thrive where others assume nothing can survive." 3 days passed. Miriam taught Thomas geography and history. She read him stories at midnight while rain streaked the windows. She watched Lord Blackwood move through his household like a ghost, appearing in doorways, vanishing into shadows, his presence a constant pressure at the edge of her awareness. On the fourth evening, Mrs. Cross arrived with news. "The Countess has petitioned the Lord Chancellor directly," she said. They were in the library, all four of them. Thomas slept upstairs, drugged by warm milk and a particularly long chapter of Robinson Crusoe. "She is claiming that Julian's guardianship was obtained through improper influence on the late Lord and Lady Hartwell." Improper influence? Miriam set down her teacup too hard. "She's accusing him of what exactly?" "She is implying that Julian used unnatural means to secure the guardianship." Mrs. Cross's voice was steady, but her hands gripped each other in her lap. "That he exercised some form of mesmerism, hypnotic suggestion. The Lord Chancellor has agreed to an inquiry." Lord Blackwood stood at the window, his back to the room. "When?" "Next Thursday. You will be required to appear. Miss Thorne will be called as a witness." "What exactly am I meant to witness?" Miriam asked. "They will ask you about Julian's habits, his hours, his diet, whether you have observed anything unusual." The word waited. Miriam thought about the two quiet movements, the impossible roses, the reflection that seemed to flicker and fade, the way Lord Blackwood never ate in her presence, never stepped into direct sunlight, never aged past the portrait on the landing that bore a date 30 years past. "I will testify to what I have observed," she said carefully. "A household that operates on an unconventional schedule, a guardian who shows genuine affection for his ward, a boy who is healing." Lord Blackwood turned, his eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something ancient in them, something that had watched centuries pass like seasons. "Miss Thorne, there are things you do not know about me, things that, if revealed, would destroy not only my guardianship, but my existence in this society." "Then perhaps you should tell me before someone else does." Silence stretched between them. "Very well." He crossed to the door and locked it. "Please sit down." Miriam sat. "I was born in 1623, Lord Blackwood said. "In this house, which has been in my family since it was built. I was transformed in 1658, during a siege that I will not describe in detail. I have lived as what I am for 235 years. Miriam's hand stayed perfectly still on her lap. "What are you?" "The word varies by language and era. In English, the common term is vampire." She waited for fear. It did not come. Instead, she felt something clicking into place. Puzzle pieces finally aligned. "You drink blood." "Yes, not human blood if I can avoid it. I maintain an arrangement with a hunting estate in Scotland that provides me with what I need. The roses that bloom in October. My blood has certain properties. The gardens have been fertilized with it for centuries." The reflection. "Mirrors are difficult. Glass less so. I can manage brief appearances when necessary." Miriam stood. She walked to where he stood and stopped 3 feet away. He watched her with the absolute stillness of a predator, uncertain whether to flee or fight. "You saved my father's reputation," she said. "You took in a traumatized boy. You protected me from Lady Ashworth's vengeance before you knew anything about me. Those actions do not change what I am. No, they change what you mean." She met his eyes. "I am not frightened of you, Lord Blackwood. I am frightened of what the Countess will do if she discovers the truth." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite relief, not quite hope. Something older and more careful than either. Call me Julian, he said. If we are to face this together, we should dispense with formality. Julian. The name felt strange on her tongue. What do we do now? The inquiry convened at 10 in the morning. Julian could not attend. Miriam sat in the antechamber of the Lord Chancellor's office, hands folded, spine straight, wearing the best dress Mrs. Cross had purchased for her. Beside her, Mrs. Cross radiated calm like a furnace radiates heat. Remember, Mrs. Cross said quietly, they will try to trap you with specific questions. Answer only what you are asked. Do not volunteer. I know how to navigate hostile interrogation, Miriam said. Lady Ashworth trained me well, though not in the way she intended. The door opened. A clerk summoned them inside. The Lord Chancellor was a heavy man, with a face like carved oak. The Countess of Whitmore sat to his right, diamond earrings catching the morning light. Lady Ashworth occupied a chair near the window, her expression that of a cat watching a mouse hole. And beside Lady Ashworth sat a man Miriam had never seen before. Thin, pale, with eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. Miss Thorne, the Lord Chancellor said, please be seated. You understand you are here as a witness regarding Lord Blackwood's fitness as guardian to young Thomas Ashworth? I understand. Very well. Please describe your duties in Lord Blackwood's household. Miriam described them. The evening lessons, the unconventional hours, the progress Thomas had made. She kept her answers precise and factual. And Lord Blackwood's health? The Lord Chancellor consulted his papers. We have reports that he suffers from a condition that prevents him from appearing in daylight. He has a sensitivity to sunlight, my lord. Many people do. Does this condition prevent him from adequately supervising the boy? On the contrary, he is more available to Thomas than most guardians would be. His schedule aligns perfectly with a child's evening routines. Lady Ashworth leaned forward. Ask her about his diet. Ask her what he eats. The Lord Chancellor frowned at the interruption but complied. Miss Thorne, have you observed Lord Blackwood's eating habits? Lord Blackwood dines privately, as is common among the aristocracy. I take my meals with Thomas in the schoolroom. You have never seen him eat? I have seen him drink tea, but never a proper meal. I have been in the household less than 3 weeks, my lord. I would not presume to testify about habits I have not had sufficient opportunity to observe. The thin man beside Lady Ashworth spoke for the first time. Perhaps I might assist the inquiry. His voice was soft, reasonable, terribly cold. My name is Victor Strand. I am a specialist in certain unusual conditions that affect the aristocracy. Mrs. Cross's hand clamped on Miriam's wrist. I have studied cases similar to Lord Blackwood's for 20 years, Strand continued. The light sensitivity, the nocturnal habits, the apparent lack of normal sustenance. These are symptoms of a rare but recognized disorder. A disorder? The Lord Chancellor's interest sharpened. A form of hereditary madness, my lord. It produces delusions, violent impulses, and eventually complete mental collapse. Those afflicted often believe themselves to be supernatural creatures. They may act on these delusions in harmful ways. Miriam felt the trap closing. I have examined the Blackwood family records, Strand said. Julian Blackwood's father was committed to an asylum for the last 5 years of his life. His grandfather died under suspicious circumstances. There is a pattern here, my lord. A pattern that places young Thomas in significant danger. That is a lie. Miriam stood before she could stop herself. Julian Blackwood's father died in a fire, not an asylum. The parish records confirm it. Parish records can be falsified, Strand said smoothly, by those with resources and motivation. As can the testimony of witnesses paid to say what their employer wishes them to say. Miriam's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Mr. Strand, who hired you to appear here today? Strand's smile did not waver. I am engaged by the Countess of Whitmore, who is concerned for the welfare of an innocent child. The Countess of Whitmore, whose late husband served on the board of Grantham Banking Consortium. Miriam turned to face the Lord Chancellor. My lord, I should disclose that my own father was falsely accused by that same consortium and died in prison awaiting trial. Lord Blackwood has spent 2 years gathering evidence of his innocence. The Countess rose from her chair. This is outrageous. You allow a governess to make wild accusations. Evidence exists, Mrs. Cross interjected calmly. Signed statements from 3 former consortium employees, attesting that Marcus Thorne discovered embezzlement by board members and was silenced to protect them. The names of those board members include the late Count Whitmore and the late Baron Hartwell. Silence crashed into the room. Lady Ashworth's face had gone gray. Edmund? You cannot mean my Edmund discovered— Your son discovered the truth 6 months before his death, Mrs. Cross said. That is why he amended his will. That is why he placed Thomas with Lord Blackwood rather than with you. He knew you would use the boy's inheritance to pay the debts your husband accumulated through fraud. You have no proof, Lady Ashworth whispered. Lord Blackwood has extensive proof. It will be presented to the proper authorities within the week. Mrs. Cross rose with the grace of a woman who had won every battle that mattered. My lord, I submit that this inquiry was initiated in bad faith by parties with personal financial interests in securing control of a minor's inheritance. I request that it be dismissed. The Lord Chancellor looked at the Countess, looked at Lady Ashworth, looked at Victor Strand, whose professional detachment had finally cracked to reveal something like fear beneath. This inquiry is suspended pending investigation of the allegations made today, he said. Lord Blackwood retains guardianship until further notice. The petitioners are advised to make themselves available for questioning. Miriam allowed herself one breath. The carriage ride back to Blackwood House took 20 minutes. Mrs. Cross spent most of it silent, watching the streets pass with an expression of profound satisfaction. You knew, Miriam said finally. You knew what evidence Julian had gathered. You knew they would attack him through the inquiry. I suspected. Julian confirmed it last night, through channels I will not describe. Mrs. Cross adjusted her gloves. He also asked me to convey a message, should things go well today. What message? He would like to speak with you. Tonight, after Thomas is asleep, in the garden. The roses glowed like embers in the darkness. Miriam wrapped her shawl tighter against the October chill and made her way down the gravel path to where Julian waited beneath an arbor. He turned at her approach. In the moonlight, he looked like a figure from a painting, all sharp edges and shadows. I heard what happened, he said. Mrs. Cross sent word. You defended me admirably. I defended the truth. It happened to serve your interests. He almost smiled. You count when you are nervous. Did you know that? I heard you counting the roses with Thomas, counting steps on the staircase, counting seconds before you speak. 12 seconds, Miriam said. Long enough to choose words, short enough that silence does not become surrender. Your father's wisdom, his legacy. She came closer until she could see the individual petals of the roses behind him, each one impossibly perfect. Julian, what happens now? The inquiry is suspended, not dismissed. They will return with new accusations. They will return with the truth. She stared at him. Strand is not merely a charlatan, Julian said quietly. He is a hunter. His family has hunted my kind for generations. He serves whoever pays him, but his true loyalty is to destruction. He will not stop until he has exposed me. Then we need to stop him first. We? Julian's voice held careful neutrality. Miss Thorne, I have endangered you enough. The evidence regarding your father will be made public regardless of my fate. You can take Thomas and go somewhere safe. I am not leaving. Her refusal stood bare like the scent of roses. Julian, I have spent 2 years believing my father died in shame. You have given me the truth. You have given Thomas a home. You have treated me as an equal from the moment we met. She stepped closer still. I do not abandon people who have earned my loyalty. Even when they are monsters? You are not a monster. You are a man who has lived too long alone. She reached up and touched his face. His skin was cool, smooth, utterly still. Let me help. His hand came up to cover hers. The touch sent something electric through her. Recognition, understanding, the shock of two separate frequencies suddenly tuned to the same wavelength. Strand will come here, Julian said, within days, if not hours. He will come with proof that cannot be dismissed and weapons that cannot be countered with words. Then we prepare. Strand came 3 nights later. It was nearly midnight. Thomas slept in the nursery, Captain Buttons clutched to his chest. Miriam was reading by the schoolroom fire when she heard the first crash from below. She was on her feet before the second crash came. The third was glass shattering, a window somewhere on the ground floor. She ran to Thomas's room first. The boy was awake, sitting up in bed, eyes huge with terror. "Miss Thorne? What's happening?" "I don't know yet." She kept her voice calm. "But I need you to do exactly as we practiced. Do you remember?" Thomas nodded. They had rehearsed this yesterday, what to do if danger came. He slipped out of bed, grabbed Captain Buttons, and opened the hidden panel in the wall that led to the servants' staircase. "Straight to Mrs. Cross's house," Miriam said. "Do not stop. Do not look back. Carstairs will be waiting at the bottom." "But Uncle Julian—" "Your uncle needs to know you are safe. That is how you help him. Go." Thomas went. Miriam waited until she heard his footsteps fade into the passage, then she grabbed the fire poker and headed for the stairs. The library was chaos. Books scattered across the floor, curtains torn from their rods. Julian stood in the center of the room, perfectly still, facing 6 men in dark coats. Victor Strand commanded them from the doorway. "The documentation is being delivered to Parliament as we speak," he said. His voice was almost pleasant. "Birth records, death records, testimony from every household that has employed you in the past century. By morning, Lord Blackwood, you will be legally dead. Your property will revert to the Crown. Your ward will be placed with his rightful guardians." "The Crown may have difficulty accepting property from a man who is standing before witnesses," Julian said. "That is rather the point." Strand smiled. "You will not be standing much longer." One of the men produced a wooden stake. Miriam did not count to 12. She did not count at all. "Mr. Strand," her voice cut through the tension like a bell. Every head turned toward her, standing on the library's upper gallery. "I have a proposition." Strand's eyes narrowed. "The governess, step away from this matter, Miss Thorne. It does not concern you. It concerns my father, whom your employers murdered." Miriam held his gaze. "I have spent the past 3 days collecting evidence of my own. Evidence that does not merely exonerate Marcus Thorne, but implicates every surviving member of the Grantham Consortium in fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice." "You are bluffing." "I am quoting." She pulled a sheaf of papers from her bodice. "These are copies. The originals are with 6 different solicitors across London, with instructions to release them to the press if anything happens to me, Lord Blackwood, or Thomas Ashworth." Strand's pleasant expression did not flicker. "You expect me to believe that a governess gathered evidence that has eluded investigators for years? I expect you to believe that the daughter of Marcus Thorne knew exactly where to look. My father kept records, hidden records in cipher, that I learned to read as a child." She descended the stairs slowly, each step a declaration. "Would you like to know what those records say about the Countess of Whitmore? About Baron Hartwell? About you?" A muscle jumped in Strand's jaw. "I would particularly enjoy reading the entry dated March 15th, 1889, Miriam continued, "the one describing a meeting at the Whitmore residence where a certain hunter was promised payment for eliminating a witness. My father, Mr. Strand, you were there." The men with the stake exchanged uncertain glances. "Kill her," Strand said. "Kill them both." No one moved. Those papers implicate you as accessories to murder, Miriam said to the men. If you proceed, you will hang alongside your employer. If you leave now, you are merely servants who walked away from a questionable contract. The man holding the stake dropped it. One by one, they filed out of the library. Strand stood alone in the doorway, his composure finally cracking. This is not over. I have connections, resources. You cannot. Victor Strand. Julian's voice was very soft. He had not moved from his position in the center of the room, but somehow the distance between them seemed to have collapsed. Your family has hunted mine for 4 generations. You have failed every time. Because you hide, because you use proxies and lawyers, and because I do not repeat mistakes. Julian stepped forward. The candlelight caught his eyes, and for an instant they gleamed red as the October roses. You will leave London tonight. You will never return. You will never again trouble anyone I care about. If you fail in this, I will find you. Strand's hand went to his collar. Not tonight, Julian said. Not with witnesses. But someday. You will never know when. You will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering if tonight is the night I come to collect what is owed. He smiled, and it was not a human smile. Consider it a professional courtesy. Hunter to hunter. Strand ran. The silence that followed was profound. Miriam sat down on the library steps and began to shake. Julian was beside her in an instant, kneeling on the scattered books, his hands hovering near her shoulders without quite touching. Miriam, you are safe. He is gone. I know, her teeth chattered. I know. It is just. The counting stopped. I did not count at all. No, you acted. Oh, you. I could have miscalculated. The papers, half of them are household accounts. I have no idea what is actually in my father's cipher. I have not had time to decode it. Julian stared at her. You were bluffing? I was gambling. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. You said you never bluff. I said nothing of the kind. For a moment he simply looked at her. Then he laughed, a sound of genuine surprise and delight that transformed his ancient face into something almost young. Miriam Thorne, he said, you are extraordinary. I am a governess who makes impulsive decisions under pressure. But she was smiling now, the shaking beginning to subside. Where is Thomas? Safe with Mrs. Cross. Carstairs confirmed it. Julian sat beside her on the steps, close enough that she could feel the cool stillness of his presence. She will bring him back in the morning. And the inquiry? Will be dismissed. Strand's flight will be noted. The evidence I have gathered will be sufficient to discredit the Countess and Lady Ashworth without dragging your father's name through another trial. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the first gray light of dawn crept across the garden. You should go inside, Miriam said. The sun. Not yet. His hand found hers, cold fingers intertwining with warm. I have avoided dawn for 200 years. Tonight, I find I want to see it. Julian, the light is painful but not deadly. I can endure a few moments. He looked at her, and in his gray eyes she saw a solitude deep as wells giving way to something new, something that had no name yet but might, given time, become hope. Stay with me? Miriam tightened her grip on his hand. Yes. They watched the sun rise together, shoulder to shoulder on the steps of a ruined library, surrounded by the scattered evidence of battles fought and won. When the first rays crept through the broken window and touched Julian's face, he winced, but did not move. It has been a very long time, he said quietly, since I had someone worth enduring pain for. Miriam did not answer with words. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the cool stillness of him, the ancient strength, the careful tenderness he showed to everything he touched. There would be time later for questions, time for decoding her father's cipher, for navigating the legal consequences of tonight, for explaining to Thomas why his governess now looked at his uncle with such peculiar intensity. Time for deciding what she wanted from a future that had suddenly expanded in ways she could not yet comprehend. But for now, there was only the dawn. The roses in the garden blazed crimson in the morning light. A blackbird sang from the arbor. And Miriam Thorne, daughter of a wrongly accused man, governess to a traumatized boy, ally to a creature who had lived for centuries, sat perfectly still and counted her blessings instead of her seconds. She reached 23 before Julian spoke again. Thomas will want breakfast when he returns. Yes, I do not eat breakfast. I have noticed. Would you teach me? How to pretend at least. For his sake. Miriam turned to look at him, this ancient being who had just asked her to teach him something as simple as pretending to eat eggs. I will teach you, she said. And you will teach me to read shadows the way you do, to hear what is not said, to see the patterns beneath society's surface. A fair exchange? I specialize in those. The sun climbed higher. Julian retreated deeper into the library's shadows, but his hand remained extended, waiting. Miriam took it without hesitation. We have work to do, she said. Yes. The Countess and Lady Ashworth will not simply accept defeat. No. And there may be others like Strand, other hunters. Almost certainly. Good. Miriam smiled, and it was not the smile of a clumsy governess dismissed for speaking the truth. It was the smile of a woman who had found her purpose in the most unlikely of places. I was beginning to worry that life here might become dull. Julian's laughter echoed through the damaged library, startling the blackbird from its perch. In the garden, the October roses turned their faces toward the morning sun, blooming impossibly red, impossibly alive, in defiance of every rule of nature. Just like everything else in this house. 3 months later, the spring roses were beginning to bud when Thomas came running into the schoolroom with a newspaper clutched in his small hands. Miss Thorne, Uncle Julian, look! The headline read, Grantham Consortium Principals Charged in Massive Fraud. Below it, in smaller print, late banker Marcus Thorne exonerated, family name cleared. Miriam read the article twice before she trusted herself to speak. The evidence had been presented. The guilty had been named. Her father's cipher, finally decoded with Julian's help over long winter evenings, had provided the final pieces. Justice, she said quietly. At last. Julian stood behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence like a change in temperature. Your father would be proud. My father would be confused. Miriam folded the newspaper carefully. He never expected anyone to fight for him after he was gone. He had you. He did not know that would be enough. Thomas tugged at her sleeve. Does this mean you will stay forever now? Miriam looked at Julian. He looked back at her with that expression she had come to know so well. The one that meant he was waiting for her to choose. That he would accept whatever she decided. That he had lived long enough to know that love could not be demanded, only offered. Thomas, she said, kneeling to meet his eyes. I am going to tell you something important. Your Uncle Julian and I have decided to become partners. Like in business? Like in everything. She glanced up at Julian, who had permitted himself the smallest of smiles. We are going to protect each other, and protect you, for as long as you need us. Thomas considered this with the gravity of a boy who had lost everything once and was determined not to lose anything again. Will you still read me Robinson Crusoe? Every night. And teach me about the constellations? Every clear evening. And count roses with me when I'm scared? Miriam pulled him into her arms. He smelled of ink and soap and the particular sweetness of children who have finally learned that they are safe. Every single time, she promised. As many roses as you need. Over Thomas's head, she met Julian's eyes. He extended his hand toward her, palm up, an invitation that asked nothing and offered everything. She took it. The spring sunlight slanted through the schoolroom windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Outside, the first roses of the new season trembled in the April wind, red as promises, red as blood, red as the dawn that Miriam had taught a 200-year-old vampire to love again. She counted them through the glass. 17, 18, 19, just enough time to choose her words. "Julian," she said, "shall we begin?" His hand closed over hers. "Yes," he said, "I believe we shall."